喳喳喳喳喳，呱！
Hello everyone, I'm Joshua Viney from Shaolin Yuzhai, and today we're going to discuss Shaolin's Wang Zhen. So to begin with, the first technique is Baiyun Guiding. It looks like this. Now this confuses people because instead of coming straight upwards, this hand moves around to the side slightly. The meaning is when you're close with your opponent and you want to push them away, this hand slides around the side of their body and you push across their face. Not striking or blocking, but pushing across their face. And you step in, like this. So if you take away the stability of his head, it's hard for him to keep his balance as you push him back. That's Baiyun Guiding, to suspend a white cloud over your head. The next technique to discuss is Yue Budancha. It looks like this. Now this technique, Dancha is used in this way. You move your head away from the opponent like you're dodging, for example if he strikes. But at the same time, I move my foot towards him. So from his perspective, I'm moving away, but actually I'm trying to gain ground on him. At the same time, as I slide in, this hand sweeps towards his groin and hits him with the ridge of the hand and the bar of the arm. So from here, I sweep in low. This technique is used in combination with Baiyun Guiding, the first technique we saw. So when we're close to the opponent, I push across his face. I push him back and sweep into his groin in this manner. Usually, if someone's standing there prepared, I wouldn't dare to use this technique because he will kick up to my face. So first, I need to take away his stance, so there's less chance of him kicking me. By pushing across him, by pushing him back a bit, I have much less chance of him kicking me with his legs and being far out of the way, and out of the way of his hands. The next thing to discuss is Pranjo. It looks like this. From here. Now, this technique, instead of being an elbow that swings across horizontally, this one lifts up vertically from underneath. And the front hand, rather than blocking, is pulling something towards it. So typically, I pull him towards me and strike upwards into his body or into his face. You strike with the point of the elbow and the upper surface of the arm. But forms are not just random collections of techniques, they are combinations and strategies. The first three techniques in Wang Zhen are to be used together. For example, he's here, I use Baiyun Guiding to push across his face. As I push him backwards, I use Dancha, I hit him in the groin. Now if you hit someone in the groin, it's likely their head will come forwards. So I follow with Pranjo, because I have an opportunity to grab his head after hitting him. But I can't, of course, rely on a certain reaction from my opponent. If this technique fails, and his head doesn't come forward, perhaps I can grab this arm and hit him. Or I can grab up on his neck and strike into his body with Panjo. Or I can grab this arm and strike him. Wherever your hand ends up, that's why it sweeps up here. Wherever your hand ends up, you grab hold of something and move in with Panjo. The next technique is Shuang Yunding. It looks like this. Shuang Yunding. Yunding means cloud peak. It's where one hand goes over the top of your head, and then your arm can be used to shield your face physically against attacks. So typically when the opponent strikes, this hand simply gets in the way of the strike. But usually we use Shuang Yunding. Shuang Yunding means double cloud peak. It's where both hands move around your head. So one hand, this arm physically shields your face, and this hand goes below, one above, one below, to physically shield your chin. And then you move your hands like this to protect yourself. So when the opponent strikes, we use the elbows to physically shield ourselves. It can be done in the small frame like this, using the elbows to shield your face, or in the large frame, where your hands extend further from your face. Again, you're not doing anything fancy, you're not deflecting or trying to catch, but just putting your hands in the way of the strike. So that's Shuang Yunding. The next technique is Henjiao. It looks like this. This technique is for when you end up very close to your opponent, like this. There are a million ways this happens, it just sort of happens in the course of fighting. So what I do is I squeeze his body with my hands, I pull him towards me and stamp on his foot as hard as I can. That's it, just a stamp. The next thing to discuss is Da Qi Xing, large frame 7 stars. It looks like this. Now, when you're receiving a sort of downwards pressure from your opponent, perhaps you're in close, instead of fighting against him and resisting and trying to stand up, what I do is I move underneath him. I grab his waist and drive my knee into his groin. Now, when you're being pushed downwards, you can't very well stand up and knee your opponent because you don't have the strength to stand up. So instead, you use the low knee strike, which is to slide your knee across the floor into him. The important thing here is to capture his momentum. You can't go down into this position and then use it. It needs to be one movement. So as soon as you decide to enter in, you drive in immediately with the technique. You can strike into his shin, because your knee is much stronger than the inside of his shin. You can strike into his thigh or into his groin and push him down. The next technique to discuss is called Gongbu Danbian. It looks like this. Now this technique is when you're too close to the opponent. Often after punching a few times, we'll end up close to each other and our hands will intertwine. Now I want to separate myself from this position, and more importantly, I want to free this hand so I can strike him. So what I do is this hand pushes across his face like this, and this hand pushes down and try and get his hand off you. I lean my body past him. My idea is to free my hands so I can then do something else, or so I can strike him. If I free my hand, I can punch into him. So when we're very close, often, for example, I can work this hand into his throat from a close range or into the side of his neck and twist. As I twist, I pull down on this hand. So I twist into him and push his hand away. Now the power of Danbian is that it strikes from no distance. Because the front hand is powered by the rear hand flying out, is that it can strike from almost no distance at all and still push the opponent away. So the next technique to discuss is called Jiao Shou. It looks like this. Now Jiao Shou is when your hands move around each other like this and you try and pinch something in the crook of your arm, particularly his arms. So again, when we're very close, we're always trying to gain control and pinch his arms in my hands like this. There are many different Qin'er techniques that come from here. A classic is if his hand is almost straight, you can just overextend his arm by moving your hands together like this. So Jiao Shou is used close. But it's a lot more than that. It's often used in the general fighting stance of Da Hong Chen. In this, we move constantly between Shubu and Dingzibu, moving our shoulders, moving our head, and constantly rotating our hands around in Jiao Shou. And then they move up to Shuang Yunding when the opponent enters our space. The next thing to discuss is Chong Tian Pao, the sky cannon. It looks like this. From here. Now what's important about this technique is the footwork. After perhaps wrapping his hands, I cover his forearms and strike him. But the point is to gain power, instead of striking upwards from here, this leg slides towards this one, which is what gives me power. Up into his face. Alternatively, if he's pressing towards me, this leg can slide backwards and I get the same technique. Or, if we're standing in the middle, I can slide both arms, both legs together and suddenly strike out. That's Chongtian Power, Sky Cannon. The next thing to discuss is Tao Chuan. It looks like this. Now, Tao Chuan, it's a bit like an uppercut. It uses power though by sliding the leg backwards. So, like this. What happens, sometimes you're too close to strike at your opponent. Right? You can strike, but you don't have, you need a bit of space to build up a powerful hit. So you slide your leg backwards to give you that space. Or perhaps to open up the space to hit him in the face, the chin, or another area. So you get the power from sliding backwards. The strike is more powerful the smaller the angle between your body and the punch. So if you're striking like this, it's pretty weak. So what we do is we lean our body forwards, well into him as we strike, and switch our shoulders across. So I'm leaning into him, I'm leaning in close, and I pull backwards to get a good strike, like this. Or make some space and strike upwards into him. So that's Tao Chuan. The next thing to discuss is Zartre. It looks like this. This is the hammer fist. Now, of course, I'm not expecting you to hammer someone on top of the head. But often, some opponents you face will duck and dodge a lot and frequently bring their head up low. And this is where you use the hammer fist. As he's dodging, I use the hammer to strike his head. It's especially good if you can chain it from straight punching, you straight punch and then hammer. So the point is, the fists draw an X across your body. They can go together or in slightly off timing. Just trying to hit your opponent's head as it's going down. Hitting on top of someone's head doesn't actually hurt his head so much, but it sends a shot down his spine, which does really make you dizzy. Right? So I'm striking him straight, he dodges down, and I hammer down into his head. You can hammer with the elbow or the forearm and the hammer of the fist. So even when he's very close, I use the same technique, hammering down with my elbows. Smoothly use power between the whole range of it. In the small range, in the small frame, these elbows can be used to protect your body. Simply, the elbows flow across you like this. And you use the hammer fists to hammer against his strikes to defend your body. But in the large frame, it's used physically to smash his body as he decides to duck. Now, of course, if someone charges into you and starts to try and throw you down, the hammer fist is not enough. It can't stop that kind of momentum. But it is good when someone's just ducking around your body and moving their head low, and perhaps preparing to do other strikes. The next thing to discuss is partial. It looks like this. Now, this technique is used to diffuse your opponent's momentum. This hand draws small circles, and this one draws large circles. This hand sticks close to the opponent, and this one adds leverage to the front hand, sticks close to your other hand, and gives it power. So for example, this hand sticking close to his, I stick to my other hand and add strength in this way. You typically use it across the frame of the opponent to throw his hands to the outside. The footwork used is gaibu. Gaibu steps across yourself. And this is typically used to circle the opponent. So from here, I'm maneuvering around his hands, and I throw his hands to one side. That's it. And then try and capture something else. You'll see the last technique here, because it stamps down to the ground. Because sometimes in the course of maneuvering your opponent's hands, you'll find you have two hands on perhaps his one arm, and you can suddenly lock his arm. Or you'll find perhaps maybe you get contact with his head, and you can suddenly throw his head down to the floor. So typically we use this to throw an aggressive opponent to the side and give him a chance to run away or... The next thing to discuss is Daisho. It looks like this. Now this is a bit like a weapons technique, where we press our shield against the opponent and stab underneath with our saber. This works in the same way. You use this hand to press against his arms and to obstruct him, to stop him blocking this one, and then this hand swings from underneath with the arm straight, upwards into him. Swinging with the arm straight and striking is very powerful. You aim your knuckles, you tilt your wrist upwards to hit your knuckles into him. If you hit with a straight wrist, it's likely you'll buckle your wrist against him. So you aim your knuckles into his body and angle them accordingly. It may seem like this is a weak wrist position, but it's not. You can actually use a lot of power this way, but you do need to test it against something and gauge how much strength you can use. You can strike low into his bladder or up higher into his heart or even upwards into his face. You see, this hand obstructs his arm to stop him blocking this one, and this hand can come underneath it and still hit him. This method of striking is called Wang Zhen. The next thing to discuss is pinching power. It looks like this. So this technique is a way of striking when very close to the opponent. For example, when we're braced together like this, as I say, this happens fairly often. It's not so easy to punch. If I punch him, it's going to have no power, no effect. So what I do is this hand slaps as hard as I can into his back, which makes him sort of tense upwards like this, at the same time as this one punches into his body, which gives this hand a lot more effect. And then I stamp with my foot at the same time to add a little bit more power. So it's from very close, like this. The next thing to discuss is Yuzhai. It looks like this. From here. Now this kick, instead of kicking straight upwards, it kicks at a slight angle, and you tilt your body and hit across with this hand, across yourself. So the idea is here, instead of kicking directly up, say into his groin, sometimes he can block it with his leg. I do a slight turning kick at an angle, which gives me a better chance of entering. At the same time, this hand comes across myself and distracts him, slaps his hand across himself. So, like this. So you push across him, perhaps his hand's close to you, you push across him as you kick him. And you dodge your body, you dodge your head out of the way. The next thing to discuss is Wang Zhen. It looks like this. Now Wang Zhen is a rolling fist. It's called it because this fist rolls in this manner and it inverts the fist, and then you strike with the heavy knuckles. So for example, on the inside of his hand, it rolls upwards. This arm simultaneously can defend myself and hit him, like this. Alternatively, it also strikes downwards. So from here, the hand rolls over the top and strikes him with these knuckles, and then up again. This is just like doing a roundhouse. When you kick over and downwards into someone's leg, you do the same. You fold that hand over the top, like this, and hit downwards into his head. You can hit with the back of the hand, or with the knuckles into the side of his head, for example, or directly even into the front of his face, like this. So you'd use it in this way, even just against the opponent's guard. Just against the opponent's guard, I come in like this. Striking upwards, it's quite difficult to block. Up and then again, down and again, up. And you can move these fists quite small around your body. So hit them multiple times, like this. So there's an upwards component and a forwards component, rolling up, down, up, like this, multiple times. You can also strike into his body with the lower hand. So this can be more of a distraction against his arms, and you can strike in, swinging the hand upwards into him, and then roll your hand over and strike again. The next technique is called Zhai. It looks like this. And this technique looks a little strange. What you're doing is, instead of winding up and striking into the opponent like this, you strike from a short range and make contact, and then push through the opponent. So the power is gained by suddenly tensing the front of your body and pushing down and through. Typically you aim for the center of his nose and push through and strike, or from an angle you aim into the side of his jaw and push down. The point in using this technique is that from this sort of strange upwards and over angle, it's very hard to perceive the strike. It's hard to see it coming, it's very difficult to block, and it's also hard to dodge. You don't need to wind up from here, because most of the strength is used from contact. So actually it can come from a very close range, from here, and hop over the top. This arm defends, gets in the way and obstructs his hands to make it harder even to block and also harder to see from his perspective. As it rolls over the top like this, and as you're close, you just suddenly tense your body and punch in. So I use it here, like this. Close range. It's also very powerful. It's called Zhai planting fist, because it's like planting your fist into the ground. Right? So here, Zhai. The next thing to discuss is Zhang Shao, the spear hand. It looks like this. So you gather your fingers together into a point, making a spear with your hand. Then your hands stick close to your center and dominate the center line and stab forwards. Don't strike with too much force because you'll still hurt your fingers even when they're together. Just lightly. You don't need so much strength because you're striking into his eyes and his throat. The point is this. You go directly towards the opponent. As the opponent punches you, you go through his strikes. This has a tendency to override his strike and stab towards his face. You don't deliberately think, oh, do I block to the inside or the outside? Rather, you hammer directly. Because of the angle of the arm, you will tend to diffuse his strike away. So as he strikes into you, you tend to override his strikes. Now, when you stab towards someone's eyes with your spears, what tends to happen is they tend to want to pull away. They don't want to lean into your spear strikes. And so they leave their lower body open. And so you always combine the spears with your knees. So as I stab into him, I'm also driving my knees forward. And his lower body is more exposed when he leans backwards. But the other reaction some people have is as you're stabbing your spears, they will tend to duck and duck below them. So as they do so, again, he brings his head straight into where my knees are. So you use this technique to dominate and control the center. The next thing to discuss is kanjo. It looks like this. So what happens is, instead of hitting with the elbow, rather you are hitting with the lower part of the forearm, this white part of your forearm. And in fact, you're not really blocking or hitting at all. You're physically obstructing your face in case you get hit. So it's usually used with a ducking sort of footwork, as we see here in the form. When I approach my opponent and duck, I don't want to just do that in case I go into his knees. So at the same time, ducking into him, I raise my elbows around my chest and face to stop me from being hit by his legs. So here and here. You can also sometimes use them to directly block the opponent's fists. If you're in a pinch and you don't have anything else, just here and here. The hand physically covers your mouth like this, and here. And your hands form an X across your body, like this. Physically obstructing your face. That's kanjo. The next technique is called Da Hu Bao To. It looks like this. It also starts from Jiao Shou, from this position. When we're very close to the opponent, we're trying to control each other. Sometimes I want to change our positions relative to each other. Maybe I want to turn around him. So this foot sticks around behind myself, and I throw his arms off me and duck my head, move him off me like that. So the idea is, when we're close, to literally throw his body around like this. If we're very close, and my hand's locked in, I can step across him and even throw his body up in the air. So there are many different techniques from here. If he's just grabbing hold or pushing me back, I can absorb some of his momentum by throwing my hand over him. I can even use it to move his body around me like this. This piece of footwork, stepping around behind myself. Here. You'll also notice after doing the technique, I roll my shoulder over like this. When the opponent's striking at me, I can even use it to lean out of the way and roll my shoulder in the way of my face, and then come back at him with my next technique. So even after changing position, I look back at him and roll my shoulder over. So there are many different uses of Da Hu Bao To. It's just a useful footwork change. So let's talk about the strategy of Da Hong Chuan as a whole. Da Hong Chuan is a very aggressive style. It's designed to keep constant pressure against the opponent. You want to keep them at the optimum range for causing as much damage as possible. So if they get too close, it pushes them away. If they get too far away, it chases them down. But you can only use a style like this when you're in a highly motivated state of mind, when you're feeling very aggressive. It contains the method for defeating itself within itself. What if you encounter an opponent who's in this highly motivated, aggressive state of mind? It's not necessarily a good idea to clash with them head to head. So we have techniques like the warding hand to turn their momentum aside and the spear hand to keep them at a distance. Now, you can't rely on being in a highly aggressive state of mind every time you fight. So Da Hong Chuan is best trained alongside other styles like Shao Hong Chuan, which is for when you're feeling more cautious. So Shao Hong Chuan is for when you're feeling small and cautious, and Da Hong Chuan for when you're feeling large and aggressive. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you'd like to see more, then please subscribe below and consider sharing this video. Thank you for your time.